Welcome to the Sovereign Career Podcast. This podcast, if you don't know already, is part of the Sovereign Career Hub, and its job is simple. It's to gather honest, practitioner-led field evidence about how AI is reshaping work, what's changing, what's breaking, and what people are figuring out in practice. What surfaces here becomes raw material for the rest of the hub. Deeper articles, practical solo audios, and ongoing community conversation. So no pressure on me then. Um, I am joined today by the wonderful Fay Wallis, and it's fantastic to have you here, Fay. I'm going to, of course, ask you lots of wonderful questions, but first, I'd really like it if, because we don't have everybody watching the video, I presume, and there's a lot of people might be listening. Well, I hope there are anyway. Um, then I thought it would be a nice thing if you could just describe the room you're sitting in, where you are located, maybe in the country, and really what you enjoy about that lovely, beautiful office that I can see behind you. I'm used to looking at it because we often chat online, but I'd like you to just describe it to others if you could. What makes you happy about it?
Of course. Oh, well, thank you so much for inviting me to be on the show, Carolyn. It's really exciting to be here. And as far as where I am in the country, I am in a tiny little town called Banstead, which most people have never heard of, which is in Surrey. So it's just outside of London in the UK. And I'm speaking to you today. I'm joining you today from my home office, which also doubles up as our spare bedroom. And when I took over this room, I ended up completely redecorating it because it was really, really dark. And I do so much of my work online. I thought, oh, I don't really want people thinking, oh, it's a bit dark and gloomy whenever I see Face. So I spent ages choosing the color. It's a sort of duck egg blue. And behind me, there's a grey minimalist sofa, which doubles up as a sofa bed so that if we have got anyone coming to stay, it means they've got somewhere to sleep. So those lucky people get to sleep in here with all of my office equipment. And I've got an abstract painting on the wall above the sofa as well. And that's probably what makes me happy because it takes me ages to choose any sort of pictures. I don't know why. I find it quite difficult decorating my house or finding paintings. And I loved this one when I saw it and saved up for it. So I felt super excited when I got to put it up
Oh,
on the
that's
wall.
beautiful. Oh, that's lovely because that's actually, it means more when you've invested in it yourself, doesn't it? And
Yeah,
you've saved up for something like that. Oh, that's wonderful.
yeah.
Well, just to say thank you for that, and also just to set the tone for the conversation for everyone who's listening. Faye, you're not here as an AI expert today, are you? Instead, we're interested in how AI shows up in real working life and the choices people are actually making, you included, of course, but also because you speak to so many HR practitioners, professionals, HRDs, etc., in the work that you do. And we will be talking about that as we go through, I'm sure, because we're bouncing off some of those wonderful things you do, including, for example, the Inspiring HR Leadership Program. But I thought it would be really nice to ask you to start off. I don't know, I do this because it helps people to place you. Where would you place yourself on the AI spectrum right now? Can I
I
ask you that?
I think if the spectrum is going from 0 with no confidence about AI at all the way up to 10 where you're an AI expert, I'd probably put myself at about a 7. I do feel fairly confident with trying out different AI tools. I'm fairly excited about it a lot of the time, although, of course, sometimes it can be a bit scary as well. I keep fairly up to date with watching videos and things like that and reading resources about AI. So I am certainly not an expert, but I'm a happy dabbler and happy user of AI.
Oh, well, that's nice to know. I mean, do you find, while I'm just on that quickly before we leave that point, do you find that is fairly normal for people to be at that level, or do you feel that you're probably a little bit more advanced than some of the people you're speaking with a lot?
I think it's probably not normal, and I've learnt that the hard way actually when I have talked about AI with other people and then just seen this absolute terror and fear on their face and kind of shut down, no, I don't want to talk about it or even consider it for my work. So that made me realize, oh gosh, I've got to go a bit more slowly here and check with people when I'm speaking to them what their thoughts are and their feelings are about AI, because I don't want to be off-putting when talking about it with people. So I've always been quite techie. I quite like tech stuff. My sister's a website designer, and just from her helping me with my website, she ended up teaching me how to do loads of it. I'd probably be a terrible website designer if that was my job, but I'm certainly not scared of getting stuck in there and testing, trying new things on my website. And with other aspects of my work as well, I've always liked embracing technology. When I was in my HR career, I remember the company started using Microsoft SharePoint for the first time, and they asked for volunteers to get extra training and become SharePoint super users. And I put my hand up straight away and absolutely loved it, and ended up building a whole HR intranet on SharePoint at the time. So I think I have always been quite into tech, and I just see AI as the next evolution of tech, really. But I mean, there are so many people who know so much more than I do.
That's really interesting because obviously your work with Bright Sky HR, which is your consultancy, is really giving you access to a lot of people with a wide range of seniority, I would expect, and also responsibility. And so, do you feel that they are starting to talk to you? Are people starting to talk to you about, oh, a little bit of insecurity, maybe about, because I know you talk about strategy a lot. So,
Mm.
and that's great. You're coaching people, your coachees to be more strategic if that's what they want.
Mm.
And so, in that pursuit, do you find that AI enters the conversation?
I think the vast majority of my work nowadays is delivered through my Inspiring HR Leadership program. And because AI is such an important topic and impacting the workplace so much at the moment, it's something that I do talk about as part of the program. And as we work our way through it, I might share tools, so different AI tools and suggestions of how they could be used. And that really is where I realized that not everyone is comfortable with AI, because I got very overexcited. And the first time I started introducing some of the tools, I could just see real resistance from a couple of people where
Yes.
they hadn't started embracing AI yet and they were quite cautious of it. So
How long ago
nowadays,
can I
sorry,
ask you? Sorry, how long ago was that, Faye?
when I first started introducing, maybe a year ago.
Yeah, and have you noticed, because I mean, obviously this is a very fast-paced development, isn't it? So are you noticing any change maybe? I mean, I was listening to a podcast, one of my favorite podcasts this morning on AI. Well, I say favorite podcast. It's where I do my research, a lot of it. Um, and they were saying that there's been a change in the last 6 months. I think it's since November. Where are we now? Yeah, since November 25, there's been a change in how people. This is an American survey, by the way, but it's by KPMG or someone like that. And it's the millions. I think they actually. I'm sure they said they'd interviewed over 1 million people, which seems crazy, or at least surveyed over 1 million people. And the result is that there's been a drop in the amount of people who feel very fearsome, who are fearing AI.
Mm.
So, and I think it's quite a big drop. It's gone from 23% down to about 17%, which is pretty amazing. That's in that 6 months. And of course, before that, it was higher, and before that, it was higher, but it's going quite fast. Are you noticing that change?
I'm not sure that I work with, that's 1 million people they've surveyed. And I definitely don't have 1 million people who I'm able to work with on a one to one or group basis. But I would say it's the same as any adoption of a new thing. Like, I remember reading a book by Seth Godin, who's a marketing expert, and he talks about when a new product is released, you always have people approaching it at different stages. So you will have some people who just love anything new and shiny and can't wait to get their hands on it and try it. And then you'll have people who are happy to give it a go and interested in it, but they probably want to have heard a bit more about it from those super excited
Yes,
people. And then you have people who are slower to adopt it. And then you've got people who are just a bit fearful and resistant to change or to trying a new
yes,
product. And I think it's exactly the same as anything else, to be honest. So as time goes on, I guess more and more people are going to become comfortable with it. And certainly when I talk about it in my program, I would say the majority of people are at least comfortable with it and maybe using it a bit. And we might have one or two people who are really advanced and really, really into it. And there might just be one or two people who yeah, aren't massively keen on it. So I think that spread probably reflects what Seth Godin talks about far more articulately than me in that book. That, it's human nature, that's how we tend to respond to any sort of new product, whether it is technology and AI or whether it's something else. I mean, I remember when the iPhone first came out and my
Yeah,
husband bought me one, and I said, "Why have you got me this? Like my Nokia's fine." And he said, "Oh, because you're gonna." Oh, sorry, he disappeared for a minute. They've come back now though, and he said, "Oh, well, because
sorry.
it's got apps." And I was like, "Well, why have I got? Why do I care about apps?" Where he
Yeah,
loves anything new and will always get his hands on it immediately, and I'm
yeah.
probably that one person down where I'm quite comfortable with tech, but I probably need to be shown it a bit before I start really getting into it.
Yes. Yes, that we are all at different stages, aren't we? I mean, if you think about the adoption curve, how people are, some people are laggards, or they're even called laggards, or they were when it first came out, the adoption curve, that bell curve thing that we've seen. Um, and crossing the chasm, it used to be a thing that technology had to do. It had to leap over this chasm from the early adopters, the
Mm,
enthusiasts, the pioneers who, like your husband and possibly me to some extent, would be,
mm,
clicking and sort of away and not worrying if it was blowing up the
mm,
White House or whatever, was sort of like, this is what we used to worry about, will it blow up the White House was a thing people said. If I press this button, what will happen? So don't worry, it's not going, it's not going to it's not going to blow it up. But I think if we really sort of um, just are so enthusiastic about using it, it can be a bit overwhelming for people who are just trying it for the first time.
mm,
And we can be a bit too enthusiastic, and
yeah,
they're sort of like, it's overwhelming. And I think that
mm,
now we see so much on well, on social media like LinkedIn, for example, which is where I
mm,
spend a lot of my time. I know you do. And we see it there. Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Is it evil? Is it good?
mm,
And you have this crazy kind of dichotomy going on, and it's overwhelming to people who are not yet part of the conversation, and that can send them in the other direction.
mm.
However, I would encourage people not just to use tools, but to get to know about AI a bit more, to understand it a bit more, because clearly that's probably something that you do, isn't it? You understand a bit more about how it works, and have you thought about the ethics and things that go with it? Do these things sort of occur to you from time to time?
Oh yeah, very very much so. And I think where the majority of my work is with HR professionals, we've got to be so careful and mindful of ethics as a profession. And where I'm a trained coach as well, there's a huge part about making sure that your practice is ethical. So it's definitely something I think about all the time as far as using it is concerned.
Yes, and, how it might impact. I mean, there's 2 narratives going on, aren't there? There's the big one, the societal one.
Mm,
How is AI going to impact our society and us as people and jobs as a whole? That's the macro level. And then you've got more of the micro level within the organization where, HR's quite concerned about what it's going to do with the data and
mm,
so forth. And have you got the guardrails in place in relation to your own organization? Sometimes in relation just to your own family. I mean, you've got to start, you look at all different levels of it. It's relevant at all levels. But that can be, I think others, I mean, I'm working with several groups of people. HR is one of them. And I find that HR is quite reticent by comparison. It's risk averse, as we all know, process driven, as we know. And when you look at some of the other groups that I work with who are more kind of like, well, we just have to get this thing done. Let's just do it.
mm.
We take the risk. They're more interested in what AI can do for them and, what the outcome, the results, if you like, more of a results based approach. Does that bear out what you know about how AI is affecting and impacting the HR teams that you work with?
I think the discussions that I tend to have wouldn't necessarily be talking about it in that depth, because when I'm talking to people or sharing tools that I think could be useful, it's very much thinking about how it can be helping them in their day-to-day work or with their team. We don't necessarily do a deep dive into how it's being used throughout the organization. One thing I have been conscious of is the fact that people have to be really aware of what their organization's policy is when it comes to AI. So at first, I think when I was really super enthusiastic about it and said, "Oh, look, everyone, I found this great tool, if you want to give it a try." And one person said, "Well, no, I can't touch it because actually it's outside of, I can't remember which AI system. Is that the right word? Don't think system's the right word. Which AI platform they had approved within their
Yeah.
organization. So I know lots
Yeah.
use Copilot, for example, lots use Gemini, and this would have been outside of it. And so, of course, I was like, "Oh, yes, of course. I work for myself. I have my own
Yes.
my own business,
It's
so
different, isn't it?
I can
Yeah.
make decisions as to, personally, if I think I'm not sharing any confidential information in that tool, I'm just trying it to see if it can, create a slide in a certain color, I'll
Yes.
give it a go. Whereas, of
Okay.
course, you haven't got that luxury if you're working for an organization where a decision's been made, that we need to make sure we're being careful with with what people are using. So we're just going to say people can just use these tools. So I think that probably my explorations of it with the HR community, I'm not working with them as an AI specialist looking at how they're going to be using AI throughout their entire organization. I'm working with them as an individual, and as part of the program that I have, may share certain tools that I think could be helpful for the topics that we're covering
Yeah.
on the show, rather than necessarily talking about, okay, what do we want to do as an HR community when it comes to potential job loss because of AI. If someone brought that as a challenge to the group coaching
Yes.
that we have,
Be
we could
different.
talk about it, but it's
Mm.
not something that's actually shown up that someone's wanted to talk about so far in the sessions.
So at the moment, it's more about HR getting on board as individuals at the moment in your sphere, in your
Well, so
experience.
no, in my sphere, it's just very much that my program looks at certain aspects that I think are helpful for HR leadership. So we look at confidence, we look at influencing skills, we look at building strategic skills. And as we work our way through that, if I think actually there's a prompt or there's a tool that I think could be a helpful addition to this session that people might like to know about if they want to learn more about AI or start feeling more confident using it, or this just could be handy, then I'll share it with them. So that really is it. But as part of the program as well, there are opportunities for one-on-one coaching and group coaching, and you can bring whatever challenge you're experiencing at work to that conversation. So if someone wanted to bring AI to that conversation, they could, but so far that hasn't happened.
That's really interesting because, my work with Jobscaping looks at how we make those decisions as to which tools we're going to use and for what type of work. And I break down based on tasks. So, because I think, if you look at it a workflow rather than a department. So if you look at a workflow, you might say onboarding a new member of staff, for example. Well, that's going to cross over maybe a few departments, for example. So if you're breaking down the tasks and then you're looking at it and saying, which of these things are above the line, below the line in terms of what I'm prepared to give to AI and what I'm going to keep as a human task. You know, you, you're making a decision really whether or not you hand it off completely to AI, whether or not you collaborate with AI, or whether or not it's a no go, no AI. Thank you. Do you have any no go, no AI tasks that you would say absolutely not? This is a human judgment thing, and I'm doing it for myself. Probably loads.
Probably.
The
Probably.
coach.
I don't know that I've thought about it from that perspective, because as far as how I use AI for myself within my business, of course, I'm not an HR practitioner anymore. I am a I'm a coach and a trainer and
Yeah.
have my own business. So the ways that I use AI are probably slightly different. So things that I might use it for that are incredibly helpful are, I'll be posting on LinkedIn, for example. I know that you already mentioned that you like being on LinkedIn, so do I. And in the old days, I would have completely written the post by myself, whereas now I might just do a brain dump and say, this is my very rough draft of what I would like to say in this post. Please, can you improve it for me? So it's like having my own personal copywriter that I have with me. If I need to create a graphic to go with the post, I'll say, this is what I would like to have in the graphic. Can you create it for me? Here are my brand colors. And then I can use that. I have a podcast, HR Coffee Time. So for that, I might have interviewed somebody and then I'll have the transcript and I will put it into AI and say, this is the transcript of my episode. I want to record an introduction and I want to record an outro where I, entice people about why it's an interesting episode to listen to. Can you give me some suggestions? Here are some key points I want to include. I'm very much
notes of those things now.
So I'm just very much using it in a practical way to support me rather than thinking deep. Obviously I'm interested in the impact of AI within workplaces, but I am conscious that I'm not an AI specialist. The challenges that HR professionals tend to come to me with aren't necessarily around deep use of AI and the ethics, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm just tending to look at it from a very practical, how can this help me within my work? Or how do I think this could help my clients actually if I find a new tool that looks like it could be quite handy, whether that's as a thinking partner or, refining a presentation for them or helping them draft a board report, for example. So yeah, I think you I strongly suspect or I know you will have such deeper level expertise at how a whole organization may be implementing AI and having recommendations for how they can use it. But that's not really what falls within my wheelhouse.
Exactly. And it's really interesting because that is exactly the perspective we want. It's your perspective, because I think a lot of the stuff that we hear about how organizations are implementing AI, I think quite a lot of it is PR based and PR driven. And in reality, what is changing is much more interesting. What is changing in terms of how you and I and other people use AI for ourselves. I mean, I use it for brainstorming a lot. Okay. And I do use it as a thinking partner, but I push back a lot. And I think that's important. So that would be my contribution to a conversation like this would be, yeah, I do use it a lot, but I push back a lot as well because I don't accept everything it tells me. Yesterday or last week, actually speaking with Sharon Green, and she was, Sharon loves to write, doesn't she? And she said, yeah, okay, AI can write really well, probably lots of stuff, but I don't want to give it that task. So is there anything that AI can do, but you don't want to give it? Or there might not be, but I'm thinking about your coaching practice now, because it's a very human to human thing, isn't it, coaching? So is there a point at which you sort of have to say no AI here at all? Or do you
I
find
think
little
with
jobs for
almost
it?
all my coaching practice, there's no AI involved. I'm trying to think if there would be any. Like if I think again, as part of the coaching, someone's saying something and I think, oh, this AI tool might be useful for you, I might share it with them, but I'm not using AI and
Would you use it at all for something like a bit of research maybe? Or, if in your coaching practice, if somebody had brought something up and you thought, "Oh, that was interesting," and you started to look at it after maybe the conversation you'd had with them after the coaching session, would you use AI to help you research anything, or do you sort of still do that yourself?
I might use it to research something like, for example, if I've got a topic for my podcast that I
Yes.
want to talk about, and I definitely prefer it to just using Google because it's much more likely to give me good links. I am just like you said about pushing back. If I want to share a theory or an idea, I want to make sure it's a valid one. And I find it's
Yes.
easier with AI tools to say, okay, make sure that you're giving me the references for this and give me the links so I can read those references myself. But I think as far as coaching is concerned, like when it comes to coaching, I take quite a purist perspective with coaching.
Mhm.
And so from a purist perspective of
Yeah.
coaching, what that would mean is as a trained coach, rather than telling people what to do or giving them mentoring and
Mm.
advice about a
Yeah.
situation,
Yeah.
I'll normally be asking them questions and helping them explore their own thinking. So within that kind of framework, I'm not normally going to be using AI in any capacity. There are times with coaching where I am more directive and I will give more advice. And so that might be in something like interview coaching. And in interview coaching, yes, I may use AI. So if someone says to me, oh, I want to prepare for an HR business partner interview, for example, I'll say, okay, do you want to, first of all, ask the employer if they're going to ask the interviewer if they're happy to share the questions with you? Because people are always surprised that often companies will do that. But
Well,
if But
Really?
yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
that's
Not
great, isn't
always,
it?
but they might but there is a
But
chance they will
it's
do.
worth asking.
It definitely is, and if not, I'll ask them for the full job description and, what context do you know about the
Mhm.
organization? And then I'll be able to put that job spec into AI and say, I have a client who's going to be interviewed for this role. What are it says, you can see in the job description what the key competencies are. Can you generate some potential competency based interview questions for me to practice with
Yes.
them? And then I'll be able to say to them, because if you say to someone, what questions are you worried about? They'll often sometimes go, well, I don't really know, or I haven't had an interview in ages. I'm not really sure
Yeah.
what to expect. But if I'm able to say, okay, well, here are some potential questions, they'll often go, oh, yeah, that one would be really hard. I'm not sure what I would say.
Yes.
So then I'm able to say, okay, well, let's have a practice. So that is one way, actually, I suppose, within my coaching practice that I do use AI.
And it's great for role play as well, isn't it? I mean, I don't know if you've ever used it for that, but if any of your, clients have ever used it for that. But that's becoming quite popular in the sense that if you download, for example, ChatGPT to your phone, you could just have
Mhm.
a chat with it about the job you wanted to apply for, tell it to interview you. You could even give it those questions that you've just mentioned, and then tell it that you would say that you want it to give you some feedback on your answers, because obviously that's the whole point. So you want to move forward.
Mm.
So that's an interesting way that it's being used. And I read that it's because people feel much less judged when they're
Yeah.
just talking with a machine, you know. And of course it's not it's being completely objective, isn't it? Well, as objective as it can be based on the information it's being given, of course, but I mean objective in the sense that it isn't looking at you and judging you based on your age or your, location, your demographic, your, race, anything like that. It's just basically helping you with that role play you've asked it to do.
Well, and I think with that example, is probably why lots of coaches are worried about AI doing them out of jobs. If people do
Really?
get so comfortable with just asking AI for
Mm,
support and, chatting to AI, like
mm.
whether coaching is still going to exist as a profession, I like to think it definitely will because although, yes, it's helpful to be using ChatGPT for these things, I think it's not quite the same as speaking to an actual person.
That's interesting, isn't it? Because this conversation about the expert comes up quite often about, not just in relation to coaches, but in relation to all sorts of SMEs as subject matter experts. And I've been looking at it in terms of regarding learning, for example, learning design. So yeah, it doesn't replace the expert, I'm told, but what it does do, it speeds up the process dramatically,
Mm.
and it lets them get to the interesting bits more quickly. So there's a lot of the stuff that the subject matter experts are really pleased that they don't have to listen through, sit through hours of drudgery about a topic that, frankly, they're never, ever, ever going to care about or see or do anything with in the future, but which they absolutely need to get a handle on in order to write the content. So their skill, their real skill is kind of, so the designer has to listen to the subject matter expert telling them all this, but the designer's real skill is different. It's something else, and they don't need to know all this stuff from the subject matter expert, so they can use AI for that side of it now, which is really helpful. But the expert in that loop is really there are two experts in that loop, and the subject matter expert I find usually doesn't want to be there any more than the instructional designer. So in that conversation, because they've both got other things they would like to be doing, and which they're very good at. So maybe AI is just helping us to cut through some of the boring grunt work, maybe in that respect.
Maybe.
I wouldn't want to sit down with an AI coach. Oh my goodness me, it would be awful. I mean, it makes all sorts of things up for a start, and I wouldn't have a clue if it was going in the right direction or not. No, I think you're safe there, Faye. I think your skills as a coach will be required for many, many years to come.
Let's hope so.
Yes, let's hope so. Well, I think although, as you say, you're not in HR now,
Mm.
just you are in the sense that you interview a lot of people
Mhm.
who on your HR Coffee Time podcast, which is doing extremely well, as I mentioned earlier at the beginning of this interview. They actually is it top 2%? Do you want to tell us a little bit more about that?
It
Because
is, yeah.
I'm in awe.
Oh, gosh, thanks, Carolyn. Yes, so my podcast, HR Coffee Time, it's ranked in the top 2% of all 3.3 million podcasts in the world, which I still can't quite believe. I was in complete shock when I found out. And it's a podcast that focuses on professional and career development for HR professionals. And so it's a combination of solo episodes from me talking about a particular topic that I think might be helpful, whether that's confidence in speaking up in meetings, or how to do well in an interview, or what skills are going to help you step up into an HR director role, as examples. And then I also have interview episodes, which might be with experts who have got expertise that I don't have. So, as an example, I interviewed someone recently whose episode's going out soon about the employee experience. Actually, no, sorry. I've got someone coming up who I'm interviewing about employee experience. I just interviewed someone about employee communications. There are too many words with employee in. So they're two topics that I don't have deep expertise in, but they do, and they're helpful things for people who work in HR to be aware of. And they'll be able to share lots of tips and advice about how to do that well. So there are lots and lots of HR podcasts out there, more coming out all the time. We're really, really lucky that there's such great choice. And when I started HR Coffee Time, though, I felt like there wasn't really anything that was very career focused, and that looked at it in that way. So that's why I decided to take that approach with it.
Yes. Yeah, quite. I mean, that is, I wonder how much confidence, because you mentioned confidence there, and I wonder how much confidence is, or lack of it, or being a bit insecure about your confidence perhaps, is holding people back. I know it held me back when I was,
Mm.
at a certain part of my career. People used to say to me, "Oh, you're ever so confident," but deep down I wasn't. And sometimes that, I'm sure you must come across that, don't you?
Oh, all the
People
time.
seeming,
All the
yeah,
time.
seeming.
I'd say that's the core thing. And the longer that you're coaching for, I think when I first started as a coach, I was really surprised when I realized just how many people, if not almost everybody, it's confidence that they often want to work on. They just want to build their confidence, whether that's in one particular area or confidence building generally. So when I was
Oh,
mentioning the Inspiring HR Leadership Program earlier, one of the core the core focuses of it is on building confidence.
is it?
Mm.
Yeah. And of course, anybody just sort of fly on the wall would be so surprised, I should imagine, at the people that are feeling that way, when really others might look at them and think, "Oh, I wish I was as confident as they are."
Oh,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah, people say that about, me when I'm working with AI. They sort of say, "Well, of course, you know all about it and everything," but it's so fast moving, Faye. You can't,
Mm.
you can't stand still for 2 minutes, and so I'm very much, you know, very much aware that I need to stay extremely vigilant. And I certainly wouldn't say that I was confident about it, but nevertheless, I take great, um, well, reassurance from the fact that nobody else knows either. And I think that's, that that's one of the things, because it's all moving so fast, isn't it? And that's one of the things that this podcast is about. It's about understanding what's changing in the way. I mean, if you looked back 4 years to your practice 4 years ago, or your daily work, just your
Mm.
work really, because there's a lot involved, isn't there, with running your own business? It's not just
Mm.
doing the delivery. I mean, I don't know how much time you would allocate, 50%, something like that, to delivery, 50% to keeping the show on the road, really. I don't know. But when we look at that, how much has that changed due to AI entering into the picture?
Mm.
Has How has it changed for you? Can you tell me how that's changed when you look back at that picture from 4 or 5 years ago compared to now?
Oh, yeah, hugely. If I think, I have an email newsletter that I send out every week, that used to take me hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of, like, agonizing over getting the wording right, whereas now I'll write the draft and put it in AI and say, "Please, can you make this so it's better?" Or I have a tendency to be quite waffly, so I'll be like, "Can you please condense this down and, improve it so, it's more engaging?" Or I start with a better question. I mean, that has just saved me hours every week
Yes.
with almost all aspects of my work that aren't the actual coaching part of it. It's just been an absolutely enormous help at just making me much faster at doing things, or meaning that I don't necessarily have to pay someone else to help me with stuff that I might have done before.
Yes, I was going to ask, what are the benefits of it? Because, you know, just talking with Tom McDowell a couple of days ago about the efficiency trap. It's easy to think, oh, we all need to be more efficient. We all need to do things faster and quicker and everything else. But actually, it's a bit of a trap. It can be for various reasons, he was saying. But I think if we look at what we're doing with the time that we save,
Mm.
what does it mean to you? Does it mean you save costs? Does it mean that you can do more stuff that you want to do? Or do you just have time off? I bet you don't.
No, I probably should think about having more time off. Yeah, I really do think the main thing is just the amount of time that it saves me. All those little things are really helpful, but also other aspects. So I started having my podcast on YouTube last year, and that was
Yeah.
really daunting because it had been audio only for years, and the idea of being on video and I don't know, I definitely didn't feel confident about that. I had to really work on my confidence. And for YouTube, things like keywords really matter, and your title really matters,
Yes.
and your thumbnail. So that's the picture that represents your video that people can choose whether to click on it or not. All those things really matter. And I knew nothing about YouTube. I wasn't really a big YouTube user, but there are AI tools that will give recommendations for titles and thumbnails and keywords to be including. And I've just found that so helpful. Even YouTube's got AI built into it now. So I can think, I think this is the title I want to use for the podcast, but I can do A/B testing with it and put in two different titles. And then it will let me know which one is more popular. And
That's
then that's
very
the one I can settle on.
sophisticated.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's taken me years to get to that point.
Yeah.
There's,
But,
you know,
however, I mean, you wouldn't if you just wouldn't have had the time, would you, a few years ago to do A/B testing on all this stuff? And
no,
I mean, and
no.
even if you did, you wouldn't have had time to tweak it because that's a marketing department type thing, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah, yeah, that's it. I suppose that's where it helps me the most is with my marketing. I would say that's definitely where I'm using it the most. And even like choosing titles for my podcast. I mean, I do still spend ages on it, but I used to spend hours agonizing over every title. There's a tool that will analyze your titles for you and tell you a ranking as to like how likely it is
That's good.
that
What tool
Google
is
will.
that? You're going to share?
It's called, I've just forgotten what it's called. I think it's called
There's
Headline
always a good
Analyzer or
name.
Headline Co-Schedule. It's not very expensive. I
Yeah.
pay an annual subscription for it, but you've got to think of the title to put in there in the first place, and then it
Yeah.
will give you recommendations on improving it. So now I can go on to ChatGPT and say, this is my episode. This is the focus of it. What would be some compelling good titles to use? And I can then put them into the headline analyzer tool. And it just starts shaping up what the final title is going to be so much quicker than how I was doing it before.
And is it having an impact? Is it actually, are you seeing the impact as a result of it?
That's such a good question. That's question. Well, I know the impact it has on me really is just the time it's taking because I will keep on going until the headline analyzer tells me I
I
have got
see.
a strong title. So
Yeah.
before, I might be spending at least 2 hours on picking one title, whereas now I might be able to do it in half an hour. So,
Right. Okay.
but it's
So
still
that's
getting the
your
same
impact,
high score.
but you're getting the same high score, and you're getting the same results with people clicking, presumably, because that's the goal, isn't it?
Yeah, hopefully.
Well, I know they are clicking because you've got quite a high profile on LinkedIn now. So what I want to ask you before you go, because there's been so much that we've covered, but I'm rushing to this because I'm hoping you will be okay with it. I'm wondering if you would give listeners some advice about how they can join the conversation about AI, not in terms of being, kind of like, just like the conversation we're talking about now, just being a bit more confident to try stuff out. How would you advise people to, be just a little bit more confident in themselves to start trying stuff and using it?
I think My advice really would be about asking people how they're using it and asking them if they'll show you. That's what I found the most helpful thing. Like, I have a friend who's really great at using AI, absolutely loves it. You know, she's ahead of me. I know you said I had to rank myself and I said a 7. She's probably at least an 8. And so she'll often try stuff out before me and be all excited about it and talking about it. And I'll say, "Oh, could you show me how you did it?" And she'll just share her screen with me and go, "So I
Yeah.
went in and asked it this, and then I did that." And I think as soon as someone shows me how to do something or they tell me how they're using it, I
Yes.
think, "Oh, that's how you do it." But I won't necessarily have had the idea on my own. And I know for other people, someone said to me once, "Well, could you just help me get the tone of this email right?" And I said, "Oh, sure." So, had a look at it. And then I went on to ChatGPT and said, "Oh, how could we tighten this up or, make this point clearer?"
Yeah.
And they went, "Oh, that's how you use it." And I
Yes.
was very lucky that I got
Yeah.
to sit in on a HR team away day, and they had brought in an internal IT person to talk everyone through how to use Copilot. And when he showed us all just on the screen, he was a really, really good trainer, really good. And I just thought, "Oh my gosh, I didn't realize I hadn't even realized I've got Copilot. Like, that's what I do?" So
Is that it? It's
as
so
soon as he'd
simple.
shown me, I was then absolutely fine. I do
Yeah.
watch quite a few TikTok videos as well. There are loads of great little short videos,
Yes.
which
That's
can
a
be
good tip.
helpful. But what I find with those is they're often geared, it's about finding the right one. They might be recommending stuff that they're wildly excited about, but you think, "I'm never gonna use that in my work," or, "I don't really see why that's such a big deal." So I've
Yes, you do
definitely
have
found it.
to be intentional otherwise, because I mean, we don't have time to consume all this stuff, do we now? I mean, that's
No,
the irony of it all really. Got
no.
less time.
But I've definitely learnt the most from other people being generous enough to show me how they're using it. So, that
And
would be
people are
what my
flattered, aren't
recommendation
they?
is. Sorry?
Yeah, people are flattered when you ask them. I
Yeah,
mean, they're quite sort of helpful, I think. It's, "Oh, yeah, of course, watch this," or "Let me help you," or whatever. So
oh,
it's always a good
yeah.
thing to
People
ask,
always
isn't it?
love it because it shows you value, what they can
Yes.
do and you value their expertise.
Yes, absolutely. Fay Wallis, it's been a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you so much for opening up your office to the Sovereign Career Podcast. I
Oh,
appreciate it very much.
you're so welcome. Thank you so much for having me on.
Not at all. We'll see you again soon, I hope. Take care.